It's Friday, November 24th, and here are our three big stories for today. Ukraine aims at major drone attack at Crimea. But the article went on and talked about how they didn't mention any casualties or damage. There wasn't anything forthcoming. So I looked over at Twitter and we saw this. Anton Gershchenko, Russian Telegram channels report 4 explosions in Crimea and the territory of a military unit. Russian Defense Ministry has already reported the destruction of 13 drones attacking Crimea. Judging from this video, the unit might have destroyed the drones with itself. And that's happened before. Okay, next article. Ukraine likely took out over 70 Russians in a precision strike 14 miles behind the front lines, UK intel says. Now, this happened some time ago. As you remember, there was an occasion on November 3rd where 19 troops from Ukraine's 128th Separate Mountain Assault Brigade were killed because they were formed together and they should not have been in formation, and they were hit with a missile. Well, about a week later, that's when that happened, and we're talking about it now because it's in the British intelligence update for today. Okay, last story. Europe should offer Trump a Ukraine deal he can't refuse. Well, what is a Ukraine deal that he can't refuse? Europe is waking up to the possibility that Donald Trump may well win back the White House. It may happen, it may not happen, but he's probably the leading candidate as far as we can tell right now. In the short term, Europe cannot replace weapons, intelligence, and diplomatic backing that Kyiv is receiving from the US. Well, what else does Europe have? It's money. Okay, Trump is at times surprisingly honest. Again, this is Political Magazine, which is a pretty solid political magazine in the United States. Trump is at times surprisingly honest. In an interview this spring, during which he claimed that he would end Russia's war against Ukraine within 24 hours, the former president refused to answer a question whether he hoped Kyiv or Moscow would win. Instead, he replied, "You know what, I'll say this. I want Europe to put up more money." Well, that is what he wanted. They think that we're a bunch of jerks. We're spending $170 billion for a faraway land, and they're right next door to that land, and they're in for 20. I don't think so. So that's how he thinks. So how do you meet someone where they think? While most U.S. leaders opposed the pipeline because it would undermine Ukraine's security, Trump's opposition was largely motivated by a desire for Europe to buy U.S. liquefied natural gas rather than financing Moscow. Thus, Europe should take advantage of this focus on money to ensure aid for Ukraine and announce multi-year purchase of U.S.-made arms for Kyiv. This would help Ukraine, it would help Europe, and would also help the transactional Trump see that he too has something at stake. It would cost Europe roughly $45 billion a year to cover the bill for America's Ukraine support. That's 0.3%. That's not 3%. That's 0.3% of the European Union's GDP, or roughly the difference between the 2% NATO target and what Germany actually spent on defense in the last 2 years. During the 1991 Gulf War, for example, Germany declined to send troops to join the coalition chasing Iraq out of Kuwait, deciding to contribute 17 billion Deutschmarks instead. So there's precedent for this kind of thing before. It's a weird way of approaching it, but it actually is one that could work, and I'm curious what you think. Also, if Trump wins in November next year, Brussels will naturally pivot toward talking money anyway. So it's a really clever thought. Last thing, for Europe to tie the US to Ukraine, how much is indeed the right question. Now, I don't know if anything will come of that, but it's a really interesting exercise to try to think, like, what would get Trump to think in terms of how to support Ukraine. Now, I would like him to do it for the right reasons, but if he won't do it for the right reasons, to do it for this reason is still doing it. Okay, tell me what you think. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and the coffees, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.